beautifully sunny day, take a minute, settle in, and take a deep breath as we transition from entering to being in this space. We recognize and welcome that we are a congregation united in love, even as we are separated in space. And we welcome those in this room, as well as those who join us online. I'm John Kachuba, co-chair of your Social Justice Committee and today's worship associate. Our celebrant is the Reverend Jen Grayson, St. John's interim minister. If you are here for the first time or for the 50th time, you are welcome into the sacred space we create together. As Unitarian Universalists, we are guided not by one particular book or holy text, but rather by the journey we are on together. Each month, we explore one theme and how it applies to our lives and our journey. This month, we are exploring justice and equity. The services you hear this month will touch on that theme in some way. We hope you'll journey with us for a variety of services and perspectives. No matter who you are, no matter how you love, you are welcome here in our religious community.
We'll now sing hymn 155, Circle Around for Freedom. We'll sing it through the first time, all of us, singing the melody, which is the, if you're looking at the hymnal, the middle line, and then the parts will be played, and so make a good attempt at the parts. So here we go. 155. Please rise in body, spirit. Little introduction this time, yeah.
I invite you to join me in reading the words of our affirmation. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all must hold the whole world in our hands. Sharing our joys and concerns is a sacred time in our worship together. It is a recognition that all of who we are matters. All that we bring into this room makes a difference. The joys, the concerns, the delights, the worries, all of it matters. Here at St. John's, we honor our joys and concerns by coming forward to place stones representing what we carry into the sand that represents the many and unique parts of our beloved community over all of the years we have existed. If you would like a joy or concern to be read, please leave them on the table. And if you're joining us online, you can enter a joy or concern in the chat that you would like shared, and we will read them from the pulpit. We have two spoken joys and concerns today. An update on Mira Rodwin. She was put on oxygen last week. And Ron and I saw her yesterday, and she was in good spirits. Ron and Edie saw her yesterday, and she was in good spirits, but confusion reigns. And Laura Bang's father, John Bang, died last week. We have no joys and concerns online today. I invite you to join me in holding those joys and concerns and all of the ones that remain unspoken in the silence of our hearts as we move into a time of prayer or meditation. Let us take this time together to be open to forgiveness and be forgiven. Let us be open to diversity and be accepted. Let us be open to expression and be understood. Let us be open to compassion and be loved. Let us be open to awareness and be known. Let us be open to sharing, to exchange, to possibility, to awakening, and be hopeful. Let us be open to gratitude and be blessed. Blessed be. Like being a little closer to the front for our story for all ages. It'll be more interactive than the typical story, although mine tend to be interactive. So this is called Change the World Kids, because I want to tell you about a group of kids in Vermont called the Change the World Kids. And they were a group of kids who were attending a Unitarian Universalist congregation a lot like ours. And they learned about some of the things that have been going on in our world with climate change and people needing help. And they wondered what they could do. They were just kids after all. But then they learned that even though not everyone can do everything, everyone can do something. We can all make a difference in the world. So they actually formed a group, an action club called the Change the World Kids. And so they help out. They do things like they traveled to another place to help tag birds, to help scientists. They raised money to get water, to get bird feeders in various places where birds have been found to be struggling. And they've done other things. And so I thought for just a moment we could talk, all of us, about some of the small things that we can do, any of us, that can make a difference for people or animals or the world in need. So does anybody have ideas? What are some small things we can do to change the world? Recycle more. Excellent. Anybody? Vote. Go ahead. Complain about stuff like gas or war so people know what's going on. Vote. Absolutely. Got to convince the adults to do most of the voting, but we got to tell them how to vote, right? Pick up trash. Conserve water. That's important. All of these are important. Back there. Visit someone in the nursing home. Be kind. Anybody else up here? Other ideas? Don't use fossil fuels as much. Yes, alternative energy. I heard about it. Why is this funny? Walk or ride a bike instead of using a car. Smile at people. Yes, that's perfect coming from you. I saw someone in the center. Shovel your neighbor's walk, right? Talk to strangers. Maybe not you guys, but they can talk to strangers. Any other ideas? Don't talk to strangers. It's all a matter of perspective. Where you're coming from makes a difference. Anybody else? Pay your pledge. Are you on the pledge campaign? I saw Joetta cheering in the back. She's giving you an extra sticker. Anybody else up here, you guys? No, not to put you on the spot.
Dig up your yard and let it go back wild.
Let your yard grow wild. Small acts of kindness, absolutely. Adopt pets. Yes, care for people, yes. Be kind to other friends. Maybe 2 more. Oh, those little free libraries are amazing, aren't they? Tutoring programs, excellent. So, just this small group of us thought of all of these great ways to make a difference. We can be Change the World kids and Change the World grown-ups, but together we can make huge ripples in the world and make a difference. So, please join me in singing the children to their classes. Okay, good. So our Split the Plate today is the Recovery Center of Hamilton County, and I have somebody coming to introduce you, right?
Are you going first, or?
I'll go first. Hello, I'm Marty Harrington. Hello. I am a lucky member of the Outreach Committee, and it is my great pleasure today to Pardon?
Speak into the mic. She's doing her best.
Thank you. See, these are mental health people. She's doing her best. I love this. So it is my great pleasure today to introduce Brian Snape. Oh, wait, you know him already. But I am introducing him as an employee of the Recovery Center, which is an admirable and innovative mental health program in our fair city. And here he is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As Marty pointed out, I am here today representing the Recovery Center of Hamilton County. How is this? All right. Before I introduce our executive director and my boss, Chris Bedotto, real quick, what the Recovery Center is well, we're an organization working towards helping people understand mental health. I am not depressed. I do not have depression. I am someone with a major depressive diagnosis. So at the Recovery Center, what we stress is that you are not your diagnosis. Our job is to reduce stigma and show you that recovery is possible. That just because you may have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or DID, anxiety, depression, it doesn't mean that you're broken or worthless as a person. I found the Recovery Center in 2018. I started there as a member. It has made a phenomenal difference in my life. And I don't just say that because I get a paycheck from the guy to my left here. It has been fundamental in my recovery so that I'm able to go out and not just talk about the Recovery Center, but I also facilitate classes. I also do video editing. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Chris Bedotto. He is the Executive Director of the Hamilton County of Recovery Center in Hamilton County. Ooh, almost got that right. Ooh, good. All right, Chris.
Thank you all for the opportunity to allow me to be here today and to say a few words about the Recovery Center of Hamilton County. So it is a peer-run mental health organization located at 2340 Auburn Avenue, so about 7 minutes from here. And by peer-run, what that really means is that all the individuals who run the programming at the Recovery Center are individuals in recovery from a mental health issue. And so they really serve as role models to people coming into the program. And it's so powerful that if you're someone who's had a mental health struggle, whether it's new or whether it's something that you've struggled with for years, to be able to come into the program and to be able to get some individual support from someone who's walked in those footsteps before you, it's just very powerful. And we're what I always term a complementary service to clinical work that's out there. We're not there to replace any sort of clinical work that goes on. We're there to provide complementary services such as individualized peer support. We also take a very holistic approach to the groups that we offer. So in Ohio, we're the largest provider of mental health groups to those we serve. We have over 50 groups that we offer in a given week, from mental health recovery classes to physical wellness to art classes, which I was admiring some of the artwork out in the lobby area, which was fantastic. We offer computer classes. We have a variety of different support groups. We have some GED classes. We also have some employment classes. And then we also just sprinkle in there a different variety of personal growth groups. So whatever we can do to help someone on their mental health recovery journey. And I tell folks when they come into the program, I like you, but my job's to get rid of you. I want you to come in here, get the support and the help that you need, and we want to help you live the most meaningful life possible out into the community. And if that means, keeping one foot in the door, you can do that. We have a couple folks that have come to our program, have found full-time jobs, but maybe come on their lunch break for a support group, or will come for an art class, or we offer some after-hours evening online supports. So those folks can still keep a foot in the door to help themselves when it comes to living that life in the community. So we're just really here to provide that support to folks that come to our program. So that's why I really appreciate y'all allowing me the opportunity to come today just to share a little bit about what we do. And I really appreciate that opportunity and your generosity. Thank you.
And if I can just add, if you're interested in learning more about the Recovery Center Hampton County, our website is recoverycenterhc.org. There you can find all sorts of things. Thank you so much.
And I should just add that your donations to the plate today will go half to the Recovery Center. You can label them to go entirely to the Recovery Center if you so desire. Thanks.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do next. Our offering words today, can you hear me or am I on mute? Thought you'd remember that phrase. Our offering words today are by Reverend Erica Hewitt. The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission. St. John's is committed to creating a safe and caring community, working for peace and social justice, and celebrating beliefs that respect freedom of thought. An offering will be gratefully received.
Our reading today is called Reading Everybody Else, and it's written by Jabari S. Jones. On a spring day in Farmington, Maine, as I was walking downtown, I made my way through a line of cars that were waiting for the light. In front of me was a large Confederate flag flying from the back of a white pickup. I crossed the street, not looking at who was driving the truck, and went into the store. As I went about my business, I felt stunned. My mind stirred with thoughts and feelings, memories and speculations. I felt fear and anger and curiosity, worry and defiance and humiliation. As I stood at the register, I chatted with the older white woman behind the counter. "Hi, how are you today?" "I'm good, how are you?" she replied. I paused, and then I told her about the truck with the flag. She said something like, "Oh yes, we have some of that around here, but don't let it upset you. Don't let it get to you." I appreciated her gesture, her attempt to comfort me. At the same time, her gesture made me more uncomfortable. She was asking me to respect that person's right to fly that flag and shrug it off like everybody else. What she failed to see, or perhaps ignore in a gesture of colorblindedness wrapped in the First Amendment, is that I am not like everybody else who walks in the shadow of that flag. I am from away. My hair is coarse. My skin is dark brown. I'm a black man in Maine. In so many ways, I am not like everybody else around here. But I want to belong here. In so many ways, that flag represents the denial of my rights, my belonging. It is impossible for me to blend in, to hide my black body, to not let it get to me. I don't have the privilege of hiding from history. Because I am conscious, I know what it is. I know its name. It rides in the back of a pickup truck. It proudly stalks around town like an alpha predator. It clings to me like a nightmare, while it seems like everyone else is walking through a dream. I point at the thing and say, "Look," and the crowd replies, "Yes, but." When I hear yes, I feel heard. When I hear but, I become invisible. My life doesn't matter. It's this but, this disbelief in the truth of black bodies, this tolerance for something that is ugly and intolerant, that is the terror that everybody else allows to walk in their midst. A casual terror that I cannot escape any more than I can escape my own body, my own consciousness. A terror that makes all lives matter less. I struggle to wake up from the nightmare and the dream that is its mirror image. I struggle to make my life matter, for black lives to matter, so that all lives will matter. There's an editor's note that Jones now lives in Burlington, Vermont.
A couple of weeks ago, we sang together, Lift Every Voice and Sing, and I gave an introduction that I'm going to give again in a moment. As some of you, or many of you know, last week, Lift Every Voice and Sing was sung at the Super Bowl, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle about that over the past several days. So we're going to sing it again. And so I want to repeat the introduction just in case you weren't here or don't remember some of the details. Lift Every Voice and Sing is often referred to as the Black National Anthem. It was written as a poem by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson in 1900. His brother John Rosman Johnson composed the music. It was the first sung in public by a choir of 500 school children at the segregated Santon School in Jacksonville, Florida, to celebrate President Lincoln's birthday. The NAACP says that at the turn of the 20th century, Johnson's lyrics eloquently captured the solemn yet hopeful appeal for the liberty of Black Americans. Set against the religious invocation of God and the promise of freedom, the song was later adopted by the NAACP and prominently used as a rallying cry during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. And clearly it is still relevant today. Let us sing together, Lift Every Voice and Sing. when our daughter, Addie, was 1 year old, she started showing her love of wordplay. She wasn't speaking much yet, but she knew her animal sounds, and her favorite was the sheep. She'd give a big baa anytime we got to a sheep in her favorite story, and she soon learned that the lamb, in another book was a baby sheep. Baa. At the same time, she was exploring the idea that every object has a name. She'd point to various objects around the room and say, "Dat?" asking what it was. "Dat? That's a rug." "Dat? That's a backpack." One day she pointed to the light in the corner of the living room, and I told her, "That's a lamp." She got a mischievous look in her eyes and let out a big bah. I'm not even kidding. After that, lamp sounds like lamb, and a lamb is a baby sheep. So soon she'd start pointing to various lights when we were out and about. Lights at church, lights in the store, and gleefully going, bah. As her parents, Virginia and I found this delightful. We knew Addie was having fun with her little joke. She's always loved playing with words that sound similar to one another. But to somebody without the backstory, what must they have thought at the baby looking, bang, at the ceiling lights at the Target store? Backstories matter. This is especially true in our religious traditions, where these backstories go back further than that of a 1-year-old. You may have heard people jokingly referred to as C&E churchgoers, that is, Christmas and Easter attendees. Or in Unitarian Universalism, perhaps we'd call them F&W churchgoers, those who show up for flower communion and water communion. But I wonder what such people make of the stories we tell together on those days. What is the story of Christmas without the backstory of the oppression of the Jewish people? What is the Christian Easter story without the backstory of the life and ministry of Jesus? What is the practice of flower communion in the United States without the story of Nazi oppression in Czechoslovakia? What is the practice of water communion without the story of the women's movement in Unitarian Universalism? Sure, an occasional visitor might find these observances lovely and even believe they understood what was happening on those days, but without the backstory, they might also find themselves confused with only a partial understanding. The backstory matters. And part of my job as is to help you as a congregation understand your own backstory and the backstory of Unitarian Universalism as a whole. Where do we come from? Why are we here? Why do we respond in certain ways or create certain systems? Even if we as individuals weren't around when that thing happened, how might it be impacting our life together today? Understanding the backstory helps us make more intentional choices about how we move forward. So today, in our month of intentional focus on justice and equity, I want to share with you some of the backstory of Unitarian Universalism's commitment to racial justice and equity. Our history can provide context for our current and future conversations about race in our tradition, because backstories matter. So let's start with the early 1900s, go back a little bit. And Reverend Ethelred Brown. Ethelred was born an Episcopalian in Jamaica in 1875. As a choir boy listening to the music at his local church, he decided that the Trinity, the idea that God would be 3 in 1, didn't add up. He stumbled across some Unitarian literature his uncle kept around, writings about an approach to Christianity that didn't involve a Trinity. And he began to consider himself a Unitarian, even though there were no Unitarian churches in Jamaica. So he decided to build his own church and become a minister, like you do. He wrote to the American Unitarian Association in the United States for help in understanding Unitarianism. And they told him that to be trained to be a minister, he'd have to come to the United States. So he traveled to Chicago, and in 1910, he started seminary at Meadville Theological School. Even there, he was told by professors he would never become a minister because he couldn't lead a white Unitarian church, and there were not any black ones. So when he graduated in 1912, he was the first black ordained Unitarian. He returned home to Jamaica, started a church there, and developed a strong theology of justice. He came back to the U.S. in 1920 and was still told there was no church for him here. So he started the Harlem Community Church in New York. Unable to get real support from the American Unitarian Association, he worked additional jobs to support his ministry and led that church for 35 years. Reverend Ethelred Brown is an important part of our backstory as Unitarian Universalists. Around the same time, here in Cincinnati, another black Unitarian minister, Reverend W.H.G. Carter, was working in our community. Many of you may remember learning about him from somewhere or from Reverend Mitra a few years ago when she preached about this. Reverend W.H.G. Carter was originally trained as an African Methodist Episcopal preacher, but found he disagreed with many of the beliefs of the denomination. Leaving the church, Reverend Carter held other jobs, but still felt called to ministry. And in 1918, he moved to Cincinnati with his family and opened the Church of Unitarian Brotherhood. It was probably the only black Unitarian church at that time. Of course, there were other Unitarians in Cincinnati, but they didn't accept Reverend Carter or his congregation. According to some, this was because they were African American and poor. About 2 decades later, a representative of the American Unitarian Association came to Cincinnati, and their official report said, "I do not recommend Unitarian fellowship for Mr. Carter or subsidy for his movement." Shortly afterward, his church closed down. We're going to touch on this story again in a few minutes, but for now, let's move forward just a bit to the 1960s. In 1963, over 1,000 Unitarian Universalists, led by the new Unitarian Universalist Association and its president, Dana McLean Greeley, participated in the historic March on Washington. 2 years later, in 1965, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sent a telegram to religious leaders, including the board of the Unitarian Universalist Association, calling them to come to Selma. The board ended their meeting and traveled together to Selma almost right away. A large number of Unitarian Universalists came as well. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, 2 UUs lost their lives. Selma galvanized Unitarian Universalism and sharpened our commitment to work on racial justice. This was confirmed when Reverend Dr. King delivered the keynote lecture, also known as the Ware Lecture, at our General Assembly, the yearly gathering of Unitarian Universalist congregations, the very next year in 1966. But this didn't mean we had figured everything out. At the same time all of this was going on in the 1960s, the General Assembly rejected a resolution that would have required congregations to drop racially discriminatory restrictions from their bylaws. But that same year, they overwhelmingly supported a resolution encouraging congregations to practice non-discrimination and also created the Commission on Religion and Race. We are complicated people with a complicated backstory. It has sometimes been challenging for our movement, built on congregational independence and freedom, to take a firm, united stand. In 1967, as the civil rights movement continued to intensify, the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, held a conference they titled the Emergency Conference on the UU Response to the Black Rebellion. I find that title intriguing. 150 people attended, 37 were black. UU minister Reverend Mark Morrison Reed tells this story. Soon after the conference began, 33 of the African Americans, including my mother, withdrew from the planned agenda to hold their own meeting. Seminarian Tom Payne, an imposing presence, was posted at the door to shoo white interlopers away. This Black caucus met through the evening and late into the night. As they talked, they tapped into the raw emotion hidden behind middle-class reasonableness. They searched for an identity more authentic than the futile attempt to be carbon copies of white people. They saw white liberalism's emphasis on integration as a one-way street that elevated white and debased black. Civil rights had changed the law, but proven ineffective at remedying black poverty. Liberal religion had failed to address the experience of blackness or to settle an African American in a major pulpit. The group called for a new agenda, and by the time they emerged, the Black Unitarian Universalist Caucus steering committee had been formed. They insisted that their agenda be voted up or down without debate, and that included a resolution that 1 million, 12% of the UUA budget, be directed toward the black community over a period of 4 years. This was the beginning of what is now known as the Black empowerment controversy. And once again, if you don't know the history, it might not make sense. Why would a group of black folks insist that 12% of the mostly white association's budget go to the black community? But when you know the backstory, the stories of Reverend Ethelred Brown in Harlem, Reverend W.H.G. Carter in Cincinnati, and so many others that I don't have time to share here today, it starts to make a little more sense. Unitarian Universalism didn't become a mostly white tradition by accident. The black people who had stepped up to lead, to form churches and fellowships in their own communities, had been dismissed and excluded for decades. And this backstory informed the actions of the Black Unitarian Universalists who insisted the association direct meaningful funds toward the black community. Reverend Morrison Reed continues, the conference sent shockwaves through the UUA. And for many, what happened during the ensuing years would be nothing less than life-defining. A paradigm shift away from integration and toward black self-determination was taking place, a change for which the UUA was ill-prepared. Some depict this as a failure of vision. The paralysis, however, is understandable. How does one decide whether to support black demands for empowerment and justice or to respect the democratic process with its vagaries and delays? At the next General Assembly, the attendees voted to support the caucus with $250,000 a year over 4 years. But later, the UUA board modified the agreement, adding oversight committees and other restrictions. The impact of this decision, which felt to many like a betrayal, rippled through the association, tearing some congregations apart and causing many people, both black and white, to leave the association, some of them forever. And the effects of the controversy continued for years. We still hear echoes of it today, especially when questions arise about budgets, who controls decisions, and about how we as an association of congregations can address racism. The backstory matters, and the Black empowerment controversy is an important part of our backstory as Unitarian Universalists. And Unitarian Universalism continues to struggle with how to be dedicated to racial justice. From 2015 to 2017, responsive resolutions were passed at General Assembly, reaffirming our commitment to racial justice. The Widening the Circle of Concern Commission explored the experiences of people who are marginalized in our congregations. Their report, published in 2020, named specific actions congregations and our association could take. A movement started to add the 8th principle about racial justice and anti-oppression work to the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism we currently affirm and promote. And when we started our current conversation about revising our Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws to outline common values, the words of that proposed 8th principle were incorporated into those values. The backstory matters. These movements and conversations within Unitarian Universalism are ongoing. In 2015, the group of Black Unitarian Universalists began meeting for spiritual connection and commitment to creating a more just and loving world for Black people. This group is now a nonprofit organization called Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUE. How many of you have heard of BLUE? Decent majority. The purpose of BLUE is threefold: expanding the power and capacity of Black UUs within our faith, providing support, information, and resources for Black Unitarian Universalists, justice-making and liberation through our faith. And born from BLUE are 9 Blue Havens, which are local gatherings of Black Unitarians in 9 cities, including ours. Again, to somebody coming in from the outside, it might not make sense. Why would there be a Black UU group with separate nonprofit status operating in a city with so many established Unitarian Universalist churches and fellowships? But as we've seen, our congregations haven't always been a place where Black people can freely explore their own spirituality and work for racial justice. The backstory matters. Here at St. John's, we passed our own commitment to racial justice in 2016. You can find a copy on our website. We also put up a banner declaring Black Lives Matter, join our work for racial justice on the corner of our building. But as our stated commitment says, actions are more powerful than words. What are we called to do as a congregation and as individuals to continue our work toward reconciliation and racial justice? What would a person without access to any backstory perceive if they saw that our banner is faded outside and then walked into the building? Are we doing something to live into the commitment we made in 2016? Would a newcomer see that commitment without knowing that document exists? I'm not sure. I know the backstory. I know you all. But are we allowing that backstory, the commitments we made, the banner we displayed, to inform how we behave today? This is why our board chose a focus on anti-racism and anti-oppression work as one of the central goals of this interim time. And it is a part of being, I saw that. It is a part of being UU to navigate this work of creating a more just and equitable society. We as a congregation and those of us who are white can find ways to support BLUE and the work of people of color in our tradition. One way to start is to participate in the Building the World We Dream About anti-racism program through the UU Council of Greater Cincinnati. There is still time to squeak in. I believe today might be your last chance. Ask Joetta, who's going to stand and wave if you have questions. Before we close, I'd like to return to the story of Reverend Carter. In 1998, Reverend Dittmar, who spoke here last week, told the story of Reverend Carter's church as part of a sermon she led here in Cincinnati. After the sermon, Reverend Carter's grandson and a church historian sought out more information about his story. They ended up leading a weekend of reconciliation for Unitarian Universalists here in the city. Was anyone involved with that? A couple of you. Reverend Mark, I'd love to, huh?
Reverend Morris Hudgens did a reconciliation to Reverend Carter.
Reverend Mark Morrison Reed offered the sermon at that event. He said, remembering the past with regret can strengthen the resolve to do the only thing we can do together to shape a more just tomorrow. For in that moment, when the one person feels hurt and the other feels sympathy, a bond is established. That connection can be built upon. And as the relationship grows, we can move beyond avoidance, guilt, and self-hatred, and let go of anger and recrimination to embrace the only things that can sustain us over the long haul, the love of God which we find in one another and our shared vision of tomorrow. As the congregation waited, Sarita Smith, a great-granddaughter of Reverend Carter, went to the pulpit. She said she was skeptical about apologies to black folks. I'm certain she was informed by the history of white people and white organizations making grand statements, but not following up on them with meaningful action. But again, the backstory matters. So she continued. She said, "You are supposed to be the most liberal of the mainstream denominations. It is very meaningful to me that you took the initiative to acknowledge a history that must be embarrassing for you, and to attempt to make amends in the present for what was wrong in the past. But we must also acknowledge that racial reconciliation, true racial reconciliation, requires commitment. I hope you will reflect on this weekend often and let it galvanize you. I hope that it will cause you to go beyond the comfortable friendships you have with your Black Unitarian friends to attempt to bring honesty, light, and compassion into the thorny area of race relations beyond the boundaries of your church." She said, "We Carters encourage you to continue to look into your hearts, ask difficult and complex questions, and take action. We accept your apology." My beloved spiritual companions, as Unitarian Universalists, we've faced the reality of racial inequity in this country. Sometimes we've contributed to it, rejecting the needs of those around us. Other times we have moved forward, making mistakes and navigating together ways to build a world different than what it was before. The backstory matters, and it is why we must continue to say and show that Black lives matter. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.
Just a few announcements as we close. I will repeat what Reverend Jen said about the UU Council's anti-racism program, which begins February 20th. It's online, it's free, it's 8 weeks. There is still time to register, as she mentioned. You can see Joetta, and this is all in your order of service. The links are too. Also, next Sunday is our partner church lunch. If you're able to help out, either donating soup, bread, or just doing some work, setting up, cleaning up, whatever, speak to Mary Lynn Schuster about that. Last thing is the men's group and Sanctuary and Immigration team together are collecting hand tools to be put into toolkits we are making for people who are in Sanctuary at Clifton United Methodist. If you have questions about that, you can see me or Amy Munson. There's a donation box in Kroll Pfeiffer if you just want to bring in tools and drop them in there. There are more announcements in your order of service and also on the e-news, so please check all that.
Our closing hymn will be 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. We'll sing verses 1 through 4. Please rise and bow to your spirit.
As we go forward, may we listen to everyone, even the voices from our own past. Go in peace, go in love.